Welcome everyone. Today we're going to be doing another list, just like the flank video. If you want to go check that out, go ahead and do it. I'll link it at the top right. But today's the damage list. I really wanted to do a list because 4th and 5th were really not able to be secured by anybody, and it's really matchup and map dependent. And I think you'll see that here. There's a lot of champions that could be 4th or 5th, but it's just really matchup dependent. So yeah, let's just go ahead and get into it. If you're enjoying the content, drop a sub and a like, and let's go ahead and get into it. So I went ahead and pre-made the tier list. I think it's a lot easier to just talk about it rather than actually place them and talk about it. So I went ahead and remade it. Spent like an hour just going through placements and really going through the games that I've had. It's looking at picks and bans, stuff like that, outputs, stats, etc. In roughly high elos between Diamond 3 and Masters lobbies around there, and a little bit lower sometimes. So all of them came into account, and we went ahead and made the damage dealers. So number one, we have Leon. Leon, I don't think that's a surprise to anybody. She has an absolutely insane burst damage on top of very high DPS, especially when you're running Precision or Alacrity. Alacrity is more for that burst damage, and Precision is more for that DPS if you're running into very beefy tank ops. If you see a Nyx and a Yagharoth or a Nyx and a Term, stuff like that, you're really going to be wanting to go that Precision. But if they're not and they're running a bit squishier, such as like Barrack, then you're going to want to go Alacrity to get that more burst damage. I don't really think Heirloom has a lot of value right now. I think it's a worse talent. I think it's okay on some long maps. But other than that, I think you're just running Alacrity for burst damage and then Precision for DPS. But yeah, that's Leon. Incredibly good damage. She got some buffs in this last patch, giving her some more base health because she was the squishiest damage champion. And it was really rough for her because she was both squishy and didn't do that much damage, and her fall off was a lot. But they went ahead and buffed that fall off, and they buffed her base weapon. So she now has 450 per shot, and then that fall off, I think, falls off later, or she has better fall off damage. I don't actually remember. It's one of the two. But yeah, that's Leon. The next two were quite secured before this patch, and I think pre-season 7, both of these guys were up in the top rows. But Shaolin and BK are both in strong. I think they could be interchanged, but for the most part, Shaolin's doing really good right now, especially in the meta, where a lot of mobility is being used. Shaolin's Cripple Arrow is really strong. Very safe champion, a lot of damage output, able to use a lot of the items very well. Very good synergies, cards is fine, talents are all really good. You can really go whatever talent and you'll do just fine. And same with BK. BK is doing really solid. Cards are good. Damage output's really good. He has very high burst damage, especially with the other champs that are in the meta for, let's say, tank. You're usually playing BK as a flank style. And so if you get a Torv or an Azan, you're really able to bully that backline. You usually just win games off of it. BK burst damage is absolutely incredible. Obviously, his talents are quite strong. Cards are quite strong. Overall, just a very good champion. And then we're in average. Now, this is where I really struggled to find a top 5, and it's because of every single champion in this average except for Tyra. Tyra honestly could go down to potentially good, but we'll talk about her in a minute. But every single champion from Dredge all the way to Betty, I've had a tough time really thinking about it, so that's why I made this list, was basically because of these 5 champions. Let's talk about Dredge first. Dredge is very map dependent. If you're running something like Ice Mines or Warder's Gate, very good. Honestly, maybe even very strong if you're running one of those maps, because he's able to hold choke points really, really easily, and probably the best out of any damage, besides maybe Betty. You just throw your broadsides and you cut off an entire choke point, or else they're probably just going to die. And on Warder's Gate, you just spam broadsides on point sometimes, and then you'll get a lot of damage off, able to kind of push them off point a little bit, able to cut those zones off in between the right and left too. Very good at just being able to hold that zones and points and have really good zone control, especially if you're running somebody like Koa. Then you can also combo it off there. Also really get into other champions such as Term, Yag, Rom, able to spam broadsides either behind them while they're holding up their stuff, or just like Yag, you can spam broadsides while she is hardening. You can just spam Rom because, well, he's setting duck basically while he's shooting his gun and doesn't really do that much damage. In Term, you can usually just get it behind him while he's holding up his shield, and then he's either forced to dash or eat the damage and usually just die right afterwards. So he's really good in those scenarios. But other scenarios where he just like is being forced out most of the time, on certain maps where he doesn't really have an angle to really hold a position or hold a point or hold a choke point, then he just gets dived really easily and he's forced to use his TP, and then he's not really doing too much the rest of the game. So yeah, very map dependent. Does really well for most matches. And then Cassie Cassie is just very, it depends on the matchup. She does really good. She has very high damage output, really good with the items right now. But if she does get overwhelmed with the flank, then she can struggle a little bit. Obviously, she does have the knockback and then a good dash, and she does have dash reset cards and really high damage output. But if she just gets a bit overwhelmed and all of that is expended at once, let's say somebody comes and pulls your cooldown of your dash, then they just come back, pull your cooldown of your knockback, and then they just kill you for free. And so you really have to be careful with your cooldowns and really careful of what comp you're playing into. But if the comp allows it and they're not really super heavy dive and you're not going to be really overwhelmed, then I think you're okay with the Cassie. And she does kind of get locked down by CC, but again, she has that knockback to really help her out. You just can't be overwhelmed. You can't really be expending both those cooldowns at once. But for the most part, just a very safe and reliable champion to do damage on. Just be careful if they're running a heavy dive, such as like Seven is on, or Torvald Buck, stuff like that. Just be careful in those scenarios, but very good and reliable champion. Octavia is quite the same, but I think Octavia is a bit safer and a bit more damage output. I'm actually going to go ahead and put her above Cassie. Octavia is just really good, and on most maps, she plays like a sniper, but with a bit more DPS. Obviously more DPS. It's not like a full sniper, it's more of like a marksman rifle, and so it does quite a bit of DPS. Very good with Wrecker, especially when we have so many shields in the meta. Just overall very good damage output. Pretty good zone control too when you're using her third talent to give your dome some damage. Pretty good zone control, pretty good point control. Quite good safety, especially when you have your ult up. If somebody dives you with your ult, you basically just kill them for free, and your leap is quite solid. Other than that, Octavia is pretty solid right now. Really good cards, very good talents, very good. I think just a very good and balanced character currently. Next is Drogos. Now, Drogos is just simply because Leon and Octavia are in the meta, or if you're still running Tyra, then Drogos just gets absolutely shitted on and ate up. It's just it's a very weird meta for Drogos, because he actually isn't bad. It's just what is in the meta in the other damage department, where Octavia and Leon are both really solid. You can't even run Cassie because her projectiles move quite quickly, and then you can hit them in the air too. But for the most part, it's just Octavia and Leon just absolutely shitting on Drogos. Very good counters to him, obviously, just because they're hit skin. And especially if you get maps with snipers, like Frog Out Timbermill, then you're obviously not going to play Drogos. So it's very hard. If you see that they have projectiles such as BK or Dredge Betty, then you can usually just go Drogos and win the match. But if you see Octavia Leon, then it is definitely going to be a struggle. And then we have Betty. Betty, it just really got some nerf after nerf after nerf after nerf. And the latest one being her to her fiery disposition. Really cutting back on her damage output. She's still fine on maps so you can hold a choke point or she can hold a zone. But other than that, Betty just kind of falls behind in the damage department. Still does a lot of damage. Like, don't get me wrong, she does a lot of damage even with fiery disposition. She just is really only good at holding choke points and zones now, which I think is good. It gives her that bit of identity such as Dredge, and does just fine in that department, but I think she does lack compared to what she used to be able to do. Her ult's obviously still bad, but the rest of her kit is just very solid. And Tyra, obviously, you're going Mercy Kill every game now. Hunting Party is just bad. There's no reason to really run it, especially if you're not getting 2 marks. You're just really running Mercy Kill for that burst damage, and I think you're doing just fine. I think she's in a very fine spot with Mercy Kill. But yeah, that's Tyra. She's always pretty solid. And then Victor just, he's very weird. It's a very old DPS character with no really mobility, nothing to be safe, and especially in a meta where flanks are super strong. If you saw my flank tier list, basically everybody was above the average and in very strong. And that's not good for Victor. Victor struggles heavily into flanks and really cannot heal himself at all in any which way. He really struggles in flanks and dies almost every single time that he sees a flank. So it's very rough for Victor, and I think that's why he's potentially good. I think he can do fine if there is either is no flank or it's a flank like Vora where they don't really have a dive potential. That's when I think he could do okay. But other than that, Victor just kind of struggles right now. And Sati is in a very weird spot. Her damage output is just meh. Her ult is not good. Her ult I don't think has ever really been good. It's just that they can heal it up really quickly. That 777 damage is very slow, because she has to fire 3 shots of 70-77, and it's just very slow damage output for that ult. You're usually able to get it healed back up and see it and dodge it every single time it's coming. So you're kind of in a weird spot where you can run ult spam, but your ult really doesn't do that much. And Windows of Opportunity, I think, got nerfed a bit back because I think the duration on the damage amplification was a bit longer. And so it's a very weird talent to run now because you really don't have that much time to do too much damage. Just lacking damage output entirely as Sati. Can work maybe sometimes if you're trying to hold the zone or like trying to cut off point with a team comp or like with a Koa, then you can usually run Sati and be okay, but a very weird character. And then Strix and Kinessa are just, they're only good on Timbermill, and Frogeye right now, they're snipers. They both struggle into the meta. I think Strix is a little bit better than Kinessa just because of more like reliable DPS with his sniper not having to charge up. But other than that, they're just only really played on the sniper maps. And Tiberius is in a very weird spot where he doesn't have too much self-peel and he only really does damage when his attack speed stem is up, and that's about it. Other than that, his damage output is quite low. He doesn't really have good talents. I haven't really looked at his cards. His ult can do fine if you have the right comp, but if you're diving with your ult, they could just turn around and try and kill you, and most of the time they will. But with some comps, he can definitely work. I think it's just damage output is quite low. His DPS is low. He has no really burst. His safety is not really there unless he runs his double dash talent. Then he has a little bit of safety. But if he doesn't, he has literally no safety, and he's just absolutely free. And yeah, I don't think Tybe is in a good spot. And then Mani, same thing almost. She has not really too much safety. Her glider is just not good. Her damage output can be okay, but her ultimate sucks. Her ultimate is probably one of the worst ultimates in the game because people just shoot it and it's dead within half a second. If you can get it off and you can make some spots with it and like somehow get it off, then it can go absolutely ballistic and it does amazing and it's one of the best ults in the game. But for the most part, you're literally not getting it off and it's just getting shot down before you even get to like a point where you can even use it. And so other than that, she has very low overall DPS, especially when she's in fire stance. You only have your ability, your right click, and then you have to switch right back to ice stance, and then you have very slow DPS coming out. It's very unreliable damage. Ult's not that great. No really safety into a dive meta. Very weird character to play right now. And then we have Vivian, Willow, and Omen. So I'll start with Vivian. I actually think maybe Willow is above Vivian, and maybe Omen is above Vivian, but Vivian's just very outdated. Her ult doesn't really do anything. Her safety is not there. She has no self-peel. She has to run her damage talent for her sensor drone, or else she, like, really just lacks because she only has her marksman rifle that does very mediocre DPS. And her shield just gets broken within half a second, and it's basically a useless ability. Her sensor drone is fine in most scenarios, but again, you have to be running Booby Trap to really get any value out of it, and it needs that damage. Ultimate doesn't really do anything. Damage is low, fall off is really high. It's just a very outdated character, unfortunately, and doesn't really do that much. Willow is just, there's no damage output with her. There's just literally no damage output. If you're running Willow, you usually can't do any damage at all. And a lot of your abilities are very telegraphed, and so they can really just quickly dodge it, especially stuff like your exploding acorn thing. I don't actually know what it is. The one that the third talent amplifies. Very telegraphed. You're usually never getting it off. Dead Zone is a fine ability, but I think most people can really just dodge it right now. And then it doesn't really get any value. It's very, very weird character to play right now. I don't think she really fits into any comps. And then Omen, same thing. Omen just doesn't fit. If I had any character and absolutely terrible, it would be Omen. Omen's cards are very meh. He only really works in a comp with Saris, and Saris is very, very bad right now. And yeah, he only really works on setup comps, and his ult is very hard to hit, especially when you don't have your... especially when it's just solo ult. If you solo ult somebody and grab them, then it pushes them out your ult, and then you can't really do it. You basically save their life. So it's a very weird character to use right now. None of his talents are good by any means. Umbra Lance actually nerfs his damage output, and so it's just a very... If I had any character and absolutely terrible, it would be him. But again, he has some comps that are going for him, such as like Sarah's comp, or things that can really set up for him. But yeah, that's going to be my damage tier list. I tried to get this as accurate as possible. If you guys have any thoughts on it, let me know in the comments below. And drop a sub and a like if you enjoyed, and drop a dislike if you don't. Helps me out. and I'll see you guys with the next support guide and other guides coming out soon. Since that is the end of the meta cover up for all the roles. Hopefully you guys enjoy. See you guys later.